So we're recording now. Okay. So welcome. And I'm Kath Lloyd, helping you to make the change from stress to success. And thank you for attending the second of the 3 webinars, I Just Want to Be Happy. And I'm really pleased to present to you tonight Lucy Batham-Read, the founder of Love Your Soul, which was set up in 2008 to help children to grow up and be healthy in mind, body and soul. And I'm really excited that Lucy is talking to us tonight because she's the phantom of all knowledge of holistic therapies. You know, I'm especially pleased because my knowledge of holistic therapies is really quite minimal. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing so much more about it. So I'm going to hand you over to Lucy now, and we can get this the show on the road, so to speak. So Lucy, good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Kath, and good evening, everybody. As Kath very kindly said, I'm Lucy Batham-Read, and my business is Love Your Soul. And the reason we set up Love Your Soul was because we felt people were worth it, and we wanted to help people that had travelled a road less travelled than us, and wanted to be able to pass on some of the information that we've learnt along our road, so that other people could maximise their own potential. So Love Your Soul was set up by me in 2008, and my goal from the onset was to help others find the help they needed when they needed it, and to help them remain healthy in mind, body and soul. My passion really is to help children to grow up being comfortable with who they are and what they're capable of, and feel safe to express themselves in ways that are healthy from them. My theory arrives around the principle that we do have a physical DNA, but we also have a non-physical one, and that's contributing to the environmental disease that we now see around us today, and that's manifesting in symptoms because of a lot of the toxic energy. My principle of understanding is that everything that happens to us, it gets stored in our body, and to a point that we're able to dismiss it from our body, and that's through lots of different ways, and we all find our own different way of doing it. But our body does have a memory bank of storing stuff, especially stress, and the hormone that stress creates, which is cortisol. One of the things to remember when we're dealing with our health and well-being is that there's never a blame attached to our symptoms, only an understanding. And with this understanding, we set ourselves free to make our own choices. So whilst past generations did see means that left them simply grateful to be alive, our past doesn't actually have to define our future. But what it does is define us to make choices about our future and how we deal with it. So that's one of the reasons why we set up Love Your Soul, and why we started. What we're trying to do today, Kath, if you can maybe move on with the what's going to call it, PowerPoint presentation, sorry. I forget my words on these things. It's quite unusual when you're trying to, you're not controlling something. So how is our health affected by our emotions? Often people confuse self-esteem with self-confidence and self-worth. So many people actually are not actually in tune with how they maximise themselves. And the principles are that nothing works well in isolation. We always need collaboration with what we're doing, and we always need to gain assistance from other people with how we're actually going to get that help. I don't know if Kath can push forward on those. So the collaboration of a number of elements, and our aim is to help you identify what those main elements are. And when we talk about what our main elements is how you identify what actually makes you tick and what makes things work for you. And from our experience, there's no one therapy that actually helps any of us unravel our own stress. And importantly, what's relevant to your story. So we move on to the next slide, please, there, Kath. That would be really helpful. Thank you. So what defines you, your family, your work and your stress is if you look at it as a big ball, and you're the one that's stuck at the bottom of that, and everything else gets piled on top of you. And if you think of stress as just a thought, as you push that thought of everything that's going on in your world, eventually become a snowball effect. and you're actually rolling a massive snowball and getting more and more stressed. So what we want to try and do is to take you on to the next step where you've actually got some balance between the two. If you move on to the next slide, that would be really helpful, thank you. So you've got the balance of them all, and you can see all of your family are working around you, and you're in a cohesive group working together. So who is Love Your Soul, and what do we do, and how can we help you, and why did we start it? Move on to the next one. Okay, Love Your Soul was formed because of my own experiences. This is what I was trying to get to, really, is the fact that I suffered an awful lot of physical symptoms because I didn't process my own anxiety and my own stress. And if you look down through that list, I had a number of things in my early life. I nearly died when I was born, and they had to make a decision of which one of us was saved. Obviously both of us saved, but it was a fairly traumatic experience for everybody. Consequently, I had asthma and eczema, and by the time I was 9, I was hospitalised for 9 weeks from a broken arm. I had numerous operations. By the time I was 13, I had glandular fever, and by the time I was 17, I had IBS. I left home when I was 18, and that progressively got worse, my IBS, to the point that I got tested for cancer. I had my appendix out, and for a while I had an eating disorder. When I was 21, I took an overdose. It wasn't actually that I wanted to stop my life, it was just that I wanted somebody to hear me, and I didn't feel I was being heard. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't dealt with particularly brilliantly, and I felt that my only option was to take control myself. And so I pulled my socks up in the sense of the word and got on with my life and travelled the world, had incredible jobs, and plastered over it basically and got on with it. Unfortunately, as a result of that, I then got chronic fatigue and I was absolutely exhausted. And then after my first baby, I got fairly dreadful postnatal depression, and it got even worse after my second baby. I then had to have a very traumatic loss of a baby, and not surprisingly, eventually I had a breakdown. Amongst that, I obviously had arthritis. But what actually was at the bottom of all of that was anxiety. And I'll come to a little bit about that in a minute. But actually every single one of those symptoms was because I was an anxious person. It required an out-of-box answers and getting to the cause, not to the symptom. And all of those, for me, were symptoms. I'm not saying that for everybody, but that was certainly my story. So working in a holistic manner means that you're looking at the whole symptom and the whole picture, which is not always easy to do, and it's not always easy to unravel. And the way we do it is through a coffee with a purpose, which is basically providing you with the information that you need for you to be able to make an informed choice about what will help you, and about all of the therapies that are out there that will actually provide you with the information that you need to. We also have a unique product range of tools which include notebooks and affirmation bracelets and vitamin sprays, because part of it is our diet and our exercise, but also is that a lot of our body doesn't get some of the nutrients. And if you look at some conditions such as fibromyalgia and energy problems, quite often it's a B12 deficiency. And we also have wellbeing boxes. But our main purpose is educating people via our Coffee with a Purpose program. So let's take a little step back to your mind, body and soul, and why they all fit together, and why it's so important that we look at the holistic approach of you. Yes, it's really important to get your diet right. Yes, it's really important to exercise. But it's really, really important that your mind, your body and your soul are in alignment with each other. So you've got a completely, total sense of well-being, self-esteem and fulfillment. And there is no one answer. It's a multiple of answers. Okay, moving on a little bit. So your beliefs become your thoughts, Your thoughts become words, your words become actions, and your actions become habits. Your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. So, how is our health affected by our emotions? People often confuse self-esteem and self-confidence with self-worth. So many people come across as confident, but deep inside fear almost everything. In addition, those with lack of self-worth are often anxious people who hide their feelings through physical symptoms. Both types of people can go through life not knowing any better. However, the longer you hide them, the longer it takes to unravel them. And it's sometimes not until you face the real trauma that you make changes that you need to. We've often learnt, however, that it's when you truly step into your own shoes and feel comfortable in them that the world suddenly won't become easier, but you will always find a way through. Stress is simply a gut feeling, but when we give it our time, it becomes a thought and then a reaction, which in itself will create a consequence. Here is one of our guides. It shows us to check on our path and make sure that we're still in tune with who we are and what works with you. It can be seen as a positive thing. However, fear is also powerful to our health when we believe it will become more than just a fleeting thought. And many people live their lives coming from a place of fear all the time. Fear of being judged, fear of being rejected, and sometimes simply fear of doing something will make our lives more difficult than it already is. For some, life appears to be a struggle on a daily basis, but strangely this is a fear that sometimes ultimately ensures people no longer trust life and end up becoming ill in both mind and body. Now, I've got a bit of a story here, which is a lesson that I've learned in my own life that's taught me why I feel this way. The day before my wedding, I had as a tradition a meal with my family and my closest friends. It was the first time my family had been together since my parents had divorced when I was 14. At the time, I was 26. The whole preparations of my wedding had been really stressful. I'd organised it single-handedly and I spent a fortune creating my dream wedding. During the course of the meal, I felt my throat swell, and eventually I had an anaphylactic shock and was rushed into hospital, and there I stayed until about 4 a.m. having adrenaline pumped into me. At the time I was asthmatic, so breathing problems was something I was very conscious of, and whilst it was alarming, I thought I'd handled it pretty well. At one point I was asked did I feel if I was well enough to go through with the wedding. I assumed it was in relation to being well enough, not whether I wanted to go through with the wedding, but nobody specifically asked that question. I replied, naturally, of course, I'll be fine. I was released about half an hour later, and I cruised through my wedding pretty high on adrenaline, and did not crash until I was safely on my honeymoon. I was told that I must have an allergic reaction to some anchovies in my meal, and I spent 16 years avoiding anchovies like the plague. No surprise now, but I was not allergic to anchovies. I have had a massive panic attack, but it took me nearly 16 years to work this out, and I was never given any reason whatsoever to think that I was not allergic to anchovies. It wasn't the anchovies that caused it. Now, if you'd suggested to me or anyone else at that point that I was an anxious person, you would have been laughed out of the room. I'd left home at 19, survived being made redundant twice, travelled the world implementing computer systems, and was at that point running the software house I'd implemented systems for. Anxious? Not something you would have sprung to mind about me. But had somebody asked me, I would have said yes. Yes, I was anxious my soon-to-be husband wouldn't always love me. Yes, I was anxious he would do the same thing my father had done. Anxious my parents would manage to get through the day okay. Anxious that people would enjoy the day I'd put together and they would not judge me on the decisions I'd taken. Anxious that I would look okay. Anxious that anyone would have an awesome day to remember. Yep, I could tick all of those boxes with bells on. So it's no real surprise I've had a panic attack. I'm a normal human being. But ask me that, it would have been much better for me to think that I was allergic to anchovies. Looking back, it would have been understandable for someone to get a bit of pre-wedding nerves in any event. But with my family history, it was hardly surprising that my nerves were slightly greater than normal. So fear is given to us for a reason, to face our inner thoughts and learn from them and do it the right thing for us. It is a healthy thing providing we put it to good use and we don't allow fear to become an emotion. It's intended to be our guide. See, I was terrified of getting married and for very good reasons, but I was not given the opportunity to face them and allow them to rationalise and let go. Instead, it was easier for everybody else around me for me to think it was anchovies. Eventually, I unravelled my fears and I let go of all the anxiety I'd stored inside my body, but it was not pain-free and it was not without me causing significant disease to my body. and it probably took 15 years. I've personally got no regrets. It's led me on this path, and I've been an incredible opportunity to change patterns for myself and for my children, something I'm internally grateful for. But one of the most important things I've learned is that fear is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Unless we face them and let them go for what they are, which is just a thought often, we often don't need to attach an emotion to it. But when we let our fears become strong emotions, they both have a habit of coming true if we ignore them, but they also cause disease inside our bodies. Anxiety is the root to most of the disease, and we can stop this by becoming wise and strong, and it won't stop us from getting tough luck in life, but it will stop us from allowing to take responsibility for our thoughts and our emotions. And the first step for this is to know our own self-worth and to understand all about self-esteem. Self-esteem does not come overnight, but it becomes wiped out overnight. And our children, more importantly than anything, deserve our help in making sure we set them on our way in the world with self-esteem intact. So what are the starting points for self-esteem? We give ourselves time to ourselves, we remain hydrated, we make sure we get fresh air, we admit when we get it wrong, we ask for help and we're not ashamed to do so, we learn our own boundaries and we don't push ourselves beyond them too hard, we eat a varied and healthy diet, we find a form of exercise we're comfortable with, we communicate at all times, we learn to say no, we strive for our own ambitions, not anybody else's, we live in the moment and we're thankful for what we do. Now conversely, if we've got children, how do we make sure that they have a strong foundation? We give them our time, we listen and hear, we do things together, we learn together, we admit it when we get it wrong with them, we apologise when we've been mean because we are frustrated with something else, we teach them the importance of a healthy diet and exercise, we help them solve a problem but we don't do it for them, we let them do things that they can do for themselves. We say no and mean it. We make promises we can keep. And we set targets for them that are achievable. Now, I spent a lot of my time of my life being scared and constantly suffered many symptoms that manifest when you suppress your feelings and your emotions. Once I made sense of them, I then had to learn many lessons about feeling and emotions. And it's fair to say that I've made choices in my life that I've learnt to feel based upon how I feel. I've come to see that feelings are just feelings. They are simply sensations in our bodies in the response to our thoughts. They are a moment in our minds that we can choose to tune into or tune off. They have something to teach us, but they aren't the truth. Every time you experience some form of anxiety, you're afraid of something that is only often in your mind. But you aren't necessarily in imminent danger, and you aren't going to die. So anxiety can be a poor guide for action. In fact, sometimes allowing it can be the quickest way to disease. The most important thing to do with feelings is to let them go. So do you know what your patterns are? Do you know if you actually are an anxious person? Have you got a lot of stress in your life? How do we define what is anxious and what is just stress? And how do we find what kind of personality we are? Because at the end of the day, understanding more about your personality will help you to find the right people to help you. Now, talking therapies are amazing, and I'm never one to knock them, but for some of us, actually talking to somebody isn't very easy because we don't actually know what we want to communicate. And that's why we found that complementary therapies are something that are really powerful when talking doesn't work for you. It might be that you don't actually know what the cause is, and sometimes talking therapies can create a problem because somebody's desperately trying to delve into something, and because it's in your subconscious mind, you're actually unraveling a lot of things that perhaps weren't there. So when we look at what our personality types are, sometimes defining what kind of personality you are will define what kind of therapy will work for you. So are you an anxious type, and do you know how to change your patterns? For all of us, sometimes change stucks. Why we stay in bad relationships, we eat at the same restaurants, we take the same path to work every day. Humans like comfort, and even that comfort is uncomfortable. So as a rule, we are a creature of habit, and breaking habits causes anything from anxiety to depression to eating a pint of Ben and Jerry's. It often takes trauma for people to change their mind, and in the meantime, we cover it up in a number of ways. So there's 3 types of personalities that you might fit into. Some that try to reduce the amount of overwhelm by pushing energy out. So hallmarks of this would be yelling, impulsive behaviours, and sickness. You suddenly get sick. Some will block the additional energy from entering into the system. So traits of this will be depression, withdrawal, and loss of appetite. And others will seek distraction from feeling the growing chaos inside them. So that could be any form of addiction, association, or watching television. You're obviously not going to have necessarily all of these, and you might cross over some of them. But those are just symptoms of people that are blocking out change because they don't feel ready or they're frightened of it. So acknowledging that you feel that way is half the battle. And knowing that confidence is such a rubbish word, because anybody can look confident, but actually feeling true in yourself and feeling grounded in who you are is a such more important thing. At some stage in our lives, we're all going to experience emotional dysfunction of some degree, especially when we're maturing. So it's learning how to curb, and as we grow, to develop ourselves and understanding ourselves and what actually our boundaries are. It's not to say that negative thoughts or feelings are dysfunctional. It's just experiencing negative thoughts are natural because we're human and as part of human experience. Instead of that negativity being suppressed, when we give it the space to breathe and allow it to actually come through us, it voluntarily gives us away of fundamental philosophies and beliefs and more positive feelings. Even though it's important to productively feel our emotions, if we want to establish and maintain our inner peace, then we have no option but to overcome the emotional dysfunction plaguing our ego and our sense of self. And that's where our ego comes into our feelings and allowing ourselves to detach from it sometimes. Some people will use rationals like I've got a short fuse or I'm heartbroken, especially when they get stuck in a cycle for a long time. The reality is, though, we have more control than we realise that we feel. And why? Because eventually there are factors which influence how we deal our highs and our lows in our life. Those factors are often our environmental factors, but the biggest factor is our own free choice. I'm just going to go through 8 examples now of reasons why we actually self-harm our confidence and ourselves. Sometimes one example would be that we're feeling unforgiving towards others. When we're resentful towards others, it's usually because they have behaved hurtfully or broken our trust. But anyone who's felt like this knows how bad it feels. It makes us feel really negatively. Therefore, forgiveness is essential for self-care. It doesn't mean that you're forgiving what they did, you're just letting go of their control over you, of your feelings. Sometimes if you're easily frustrated with small matters, if you're easily frustrated, it usually indicates that deep down we're angry or sad. We could be holding on to anger or disappointment from our past that we're not ready to let go. When life is so short, it's painfully self-destructive to be constantly irritated. It's a really stressful experience, and stress does kill. So being irritated all the time is simply a manifestation of unresolved emotions that then cause us around you to suffer. Sadness and depression. Life isn't all wine and chocolates. It's a roller coaster of emotional highs. Some of the experiences are harder to deal with and take a more advanced emotional development to process. So of course at times we're going to feel sad, but it becomes dysfunctional if we're sad more often than not. And a lack of self-esteem, ongoing negativity can lead to depression. Worrying is one of the most common dysfunctional states of our age. It's most often nurtured or learned behaviour. Our parents and a fear-consumed society have taught us to worry about the future, our kids, our health, everything. The most irrational aspect of worrying is that we add up the amount of times we worried about something and the times we actually eventuated to an undesired way. So the reality is that probably only 3% of what we worry about actually happens, but actually we can manifest that into a snowball. The other one is negatively judging others. We make judgments every single day. It's perfectly natural to assess the environment that we're in. But when we negatively judge others, it's usually through a comparison of ourselves. And so when we're saying, I can't believe I actually do that, we might be the person having a negative image of them, but actually we're reflecting it much more on ourselves. And the other one is jealous behaviour and being jealous of any form of anybody on any level. So change is really hard. First of all, you've got to be motivated. So when you want to make change in your life, you've really got to want it. And often the only time we make change in our life is because we've got no choice. And the option of staying stuck is far more painful than it is of actually moving. The next one is willpower. And when motivation starts to wane, you start relying on willpower. So nobody has an endless source of willpower, and it's a resource that gets used up. And often this is when we stop change, because we've lost the will to keep going. And often this is the time when we really need to lean into help from other people. So taking baby steps for making your change is really important. It's also really important to have triggers, and it's also really important to be prepared. If you're going to start a new habit, you've got to be prepared for it. And a successful way of training a habit is to put it into baby steps and to not expect yourself to change all the time. It's also really important that you make it convenient. So when you're changing something, it mustn't be too difficult for you to do, and it must be fun. The other thing that's really important is that you write down what you're planning on changing and how you're going to change it. And we're going to come on to a few more steps in a minute on how you change it. But the point with going through all of those scenarios of anxiety and emotions is to understand that as we get stressed, we actually create a chemical reaction in our body using the cortisol that actually enables our body to eventually shut down and makes us prone to conditions such as autoimmune conditions such as ME, which is what I had. You can also have adrenal fatigue when your body starts shutting down completely, as well as many of the other symptoms of anxiety and depression. Eczema is one, asthma is another, IBS is another, and sadly cancer is another. And as you store your emotions, the more ill you get progressively. Now, how do we resolve this? Often it means putting a hand out to others and to getting help from others. And there's a depth of experience out there and a depth of therapies out there that can help you get the help that you need to have. Now, one such therapy is EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, which is something that you can actually teach yourself to do, and is an easy tool that's easy to use and to be able to apply to your whole life. Now, EFT is a tapping theory which taps into the meridians around your body, but you do need to get a really good practitioner to introduce it to you. The next one is acupuncture, and acupuncture has been around for thousands of years, and it will tap into your meridians. Not for everybody. It took me 25 years to accept acupuncture because I came awake in an operation and I was terrified of needles, so I actually had to overcome a fear of needles to be able to go to it. But I have it every 3 weeks now because it keeps my hormones in balance. And hormones are one of the key things for women particularly, and thyroid problems for actually part of the depression and anxiety. And if you read up on hormones and on thyroids, you'll see that actually a lot of people that get diagnosed with depression don't have depression, they have a thyroid problem, which is why complementary therapies are actually a much more beneficial way of getting to the root of some of the symptoms that we have. Another one is cranial osteopathy, and we've also got Ayurveda, yoga, and kinesiology, exercise. There's actually well over 350 different kinds of therapies, and it'd be very difficult for me to go through every single one and listen for you, which is why we've put together a program called Coffee with a Purpose that brings to you all of the different therapies and therapists, so you can actually understand what it does for you and why it might be the right therapy for you to choose for your particular condition. A lot of therapists out there are selling their wares. There's some incredibly good therapists out there, but it's a connection thing. It's not just about providing you with a therapy. And it's very much down to, which is why they talk to you, they find out your history, and they spend a lot of time sitting down with you and understanding more about what your symptoms are, so that you can actually get to the cause. Now, if I was to choose 4 therapies that I would recommend to everybody, they would be acupuncture, cranial osteopathy, yoga, and Ayurvedic medicine. The other ones would be naturopath. Naturopath is a combination of 3 therapies, but it's very, very difficult to come up with one answer, because there isn't one answer. Your combination of therapies to help you unravel your stress and your anxiety is unique to you, and it will take at least 3 therapists, and maybe that be exercise, yoga and acupuncture. It might be cranial osteopathy. I had a lot of cranial osteopathy when I lost my baby, and for all 3 of my children, and it's about realignment, and it's about healing of our insides, and there's an awful lot to be said these days about healing and about intuitive counselling, and there's an awful lot of good people out there that can give you guidance on that. But what we try and do is to give you information from therapists that are unique to you in your area that you can connect with, so that you can find out more about them and why they can help you. I personally feel that we're all incredibly unique, our stories are very unique, and our futures are very unique, and until you're prepared to take a step back and breathe and look at the bigger picture, there's not actually anybody that can help you through your process but you. You are the answer to your lottery, if you like, and it's a question of taking that step into understanding which route you want to take. I can't tell you any one therapy for the right one for you, but I can tell you that the therapists are out there for unravelling so much more than just taking a tablet or talking to somebody. And I can tell you from my personal experience that it took me 10 years. It took me starting off with a homeopath that calmed me down enough to be able to get into my headspace. I then spent 3 years with a cranial osteopath who realigned my body. I've spent 15 years doing yoga. I have seen an Ayurvedic specialist for 3 years, and I've now been seeing an acupuncturist for the last 1.5 years. Amongst that, I've done EFT, Reiki, exercise, yoga, and I've done some kinesiology. So for me, all of those therapies that I've listed there have been an integral part of my last 10 years. For you, it might be another 15 therapies. It's really, really unique. We work with an organisation called the CTHA, and they have a whole list of therapists all over the country, and they're all registered, and they're all highly qualified people. But the reason we do the Coffee with a Purpose is that so that you can meet the therapist that's in your area, and you can listen to them and you can hear their passion about why they're so passionate about their therapy. And that allows you the time and the space to understand whether it's something that would work for you or not. Okay, I think, Kath, if we can move on to the next one. So we provide you the most important thing with what we feel is part of unraveling stress is communicating. And it's communicating in a way that you feel safe about communicating, and it's a way that it's important that you feel heard, and that's why we put these talks on, so that you can sit around your kitchen table with a group of people that you feel safe with and learn more about your health and your well-being, but also unravel your stress. It's all very well saying that stress is getting on top of you, but life in the 21st century is tough, and dealing with your day is not always easy. and everybody has different stresses and different pressures in their life, and talking is good. It's good to talk, but it's good to talk in a way that you feel comfortable with and in a way that you feel as if you're making progress. So we feel that actually getting a group of people in your kitchen and inviting in a therapist that you're interested in learning about is one of the best de-stressors that you can actually have. But it also gives you the chance to talk to a therapist and understand more about them and what makes them tick. And it also gives you a chance to talk to people that are in your life on a daily basis that can help you through it, because nothing ever works in isolation. So we can move on to the next one. We link with the CTHA and how we help you. We have a unique product service. We have a number of products, and we have a program that we're just launching to help people deal with their stress. And it's an intuitive monthly program where we tune into you, and we correspond with what's going on in your life, and we give you tips and therapist guides on who would be a good person for you to go and see. And we also have a range of products that help you through that. Move on to the next one. Vitamins. Part of a lot of stress is our body's ability to absorb vitamins. And we work with a range of vitamins that a lot of you, or a lot of us, don't actually have them in. Our body doesn't absorb them. We've got wellbeing boxes too, which give you a range of products to keep you in track with yourself. So we have affirmation bracelets, which are bracelets that you wear on your wrist with a set of words to remind you on a daily basis about how wonderful you are. And it sounds really silly and obvious, but sometimes when we are stressed, we find it very difficult to come back into our own grounded self, and we find that the bracelets are a gentle reminder every day to tune into your own well-being and your own mind. Move on to the next one, please, Kath. So our aim with our tools is to help you prevent disease, to live life to the full. So I'm just going to show very quickly now our range of boxes. We've got the Good Life, New Parents, Stressless, Peaceful Sleep, Ageless, Your Perfect Body, and Beat the Winter Blues. They're all ranges that that people will tune into that are actually a good starting point. Is it sleep that's stopping you, getting you stressed? Is it that you're a new parent? Is it your age and worrying about Alzheimer's and osteoporosis? Are you at an age where you're in a body image world? Is that causing some of your stress? Or do you just want to keep your balance, keep a good life? Or are you at that phase in life when you're just being introduced to children and the whole daunting area of becoming a new parent? So there's a number of stages in our life that are typical triggers for us becoming more stressed, and we have programs that approach each different stage and give you guidance on which is the right way, which is the right route for you. And we obviously have a trauma area when life really does. Okay. So we have a 17-point plan of why you need to keep on top of yourself. You need to be honest with yourself. You need to dream. Dreams are all part of moving us forward. You need to accept your body. You need to try and stop worrying about things that haven't actually happened. You need to set yourself goals and objectives which you want to achieve. You need to make sure that you give yourself time and you give yourself headspace, even if it's a cup of tea in the morning when you go and sit down, and to always remember that your health is your wealth. Remember to say no. Surround yourself with positive people. It's really, really important that you have positive people around you. Remember that sugar is stress. Sugar is something that our body doesn't recognize. It doesn't know what it is. It has no nutritional value. So it stores it in our body to a point that we've got no stress going on and then lets it out. But if you've got stress in your life, the sugar will store in your body and it will obviously then just become fat. If you've got too much cortisol in your body, the two combine will create energy inside your body that will actually create more disease. Remember to speak up. It's really important that you speak up for yourself and you become a positive communicator. It's really important that you're able to be assertive with yourself in a gentle way, that you can set your own boundaries. Remember, everything in life is possible. It just means you setting goals and you being realistic with your goals and with your boundaries on a way that you feel comfortable with. And life's about fun and laughter. It's an obvious one. It's something that we all tend to forget every so often. And life isn't taken too seriously. My biggest one, to be honest, is to listen and to hear. You'd be amazed at what you actually learn by not talking. And often when we actually listen, we learn so much more than when we actually talk. And when you listen to what's going on and not what's being said, you'll find an awful lot more. So, be grateful. The more grateful we are for what the small things in life, the bigger the great things come up in our life. And to trust. It's a really hard one. But as more we trust that life will provide us with the good things in life, the more likely they are to happen to us. So the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or touched, but they can only be felt by the heart. When you work from your heart and you operate from your heart, not your head, you find that life actually works much better for you. It's a massive thing to shift from the head to the heart, and it's an awfully difficult lesson to learn, and it's not one that we as humans were necessarily taught. We were taught to operate from the head. But the more often that you listen to your intuition and you listen to your heart, you find that you get the answers that you need at the right time. And you also find that you get the help that you need at the right time. As I say, it's not an easy thing to do, it's an incredibly difficult thing. But anything is possible if you want it enough and you take the steps towards it. So, that's it. Thank you very much for your time. I hope I've helped you a little. Obviously, it's very difficult to talk about specific therapies because without knowing what your particular problems are, but I'm very welcome to answer any questions specifically about any therapies. And if I can help you guide to the right ones, then I would be absolutely delighted to.
Thank you, Lucy. That was...
Handing back to you now, Kat.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, it's absolutely fascinating, and hearing the connection between what I was talking about yesterday, the self-sabotaging techniques that keep coming through, that we have to notice within ourselves, stepping back, thinking things through, planning for the future. What do you want to be for the future? It all links up, doesn't it? And I thought the way you were saying how important it is to sit around the table with the right people and the right therapist so that you can all tap into the information together. I thought that was a really nice idea. And we don't really think about it in that way, do we? We think about going and seeing somebody rather than sitting down all together and discussing it.
Well, I think, yeah, and I think we've been taught to work in isolation and not to reach out as a community. And I think bringing back the community aspect of sharing is caring is such a healthy thing. And I think a lot of problems when they're shared are halved instantly. And a lot particularly for mums, is that you want to be the perfect mum, wife, lover, mother, etc. And it's very difficult to admit that you don't know the answers sometimes.
Yes.
And what we find with these is that mums suddenly share, oh, I had that problem. Oh, wow. Yes, I had that problem. And I know you do it at a normal coffee when you're chatting with friends, but it quite often tends to be superficial. And what we find with the talks is that you go down a slightly deeper level. And it's not that you want to be all philosophical, etc., but you do find that problems get halved and shared, and you find that you perhaps don't need to spend as much money on therapy as you thought you did. But I think the thing with all of this is that it's not an instant fix. If you go to doctors, they'll automatically give you a tablet. And it might well be the answer for the short term. But I think with the holistic therapies, you actually get to the root cause of it, which is a much longer term fix and a much more sustainable fix. But you're spending money, and it's not an easy decision to spend the money these days. So finding out a bit more about the therapies and the therapist enables you to make sure that you're spending your money more wisely.
I mean, I know perhaps the people who are listening are probably thinking the same thing, but how do you organise one of these, sit round the table and have a chat with a cup of coffee with a therapist?
Well, we've got a programme that we put together that gives you 12 months talks. So we've effectively done it all for you. And what we do is help you find the therapist to come and do it and associate you with a clinic in your area. Because what we've found is that therapists are desperate to talk. They're also absolutely rubbish at selling themselves typically. And this is the perfect way for them to talk about their passion without selling themselves, because it's against their nature. They want to heal, they don't want to sell.
Yes.
But coming and talking to you in your kitchen, it overtakes them. Their passion about why they want to help you just shines through. And they love doing it, and they love using it as an experience to get on the platform of going out and doing talks. So it's a complete win-win situation for everybody, and it builds a community for the therapists. They find that their clients are more loyal to them because they understand more about them.
Yes.
I think one of the biggest problems that we've found with looking for help with stress is that you go and fix the instant problem. You don't keep going, and you don't sustain it, and you don't manage it. Whereas by doing it this way, you're creating a relationship with somebody which is slightly a deeper level, not too deep a level, but you understand more about each other, and therefore you've got a want to keep that connection going.
So can you just run us through how we could organise one of those if we wanted to? So, do we tap into you tap into your website?
Tap into the website, and you there's a program on the main side that says Coffee with a Purpose. You register with us, and we send you your pack of 12 months talks, and then get in contact with me, and I will arrange for you to be hooked up with a clinic in your area, and I'll do the research to make sure that you've got the right clinic to get it up and running.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And then what we're finding, we're actually doing stuff with them. We're actually doing a Cancer Thrivers program for people that have had cancer. I'm working with one of the charities, because people often fall into a black hole once they've had cancer and they've finished the treatment, and they want to educate themselves, and they want to sort of regroup, and they don't want to lose the support network, because quite often once the doctors have gone. And so we're doing a program with them for Cancer Thrivers. So you can be a topic that you want to cover for a year, and if you've just had a baby, there's a range of talks that we can target at babies, but you can also just do a general stress buster course.
Oh wow! I mean, that is fantastic, and I mean, I could talk to you for ages about this, but I want to give our attendees time to ask their own questions, because otherwise I'll monopolise the time. So before we go on to the questions, what I just want to do is to remind everybody about what's happening tomorrow. And so we've got Alexandra Jones from The Healthy Girl talking to us about nutrition and exercise to combat stress. Now, she is a nutrition and exercise expert. She has owned her own gym in the past. She understands how the different food groups affect your body, you know, in different sorts of ways. And so if you haven't registered already, there's still time to register for that, because she's got fantastic knowledge. Also, what I've got to publish yet are a short series of interviews by sufferers of stress-related illnesses and also carers. And if you listen to those interviews, you can hear how a lot of these things are running through, you know, all of these people's lives, their thought processes, you know, their habits. And so it's really interesting to see those connections. But before we go on to the questions, I just want to remind you where all this started from, because originally this started to help raise funds for Young Minds. And Young Minds are a charity that supports children, young people and their carers around mental health. And the way I'm raising money for this it can be through just simple donation, but also through a photographic competition, which is about representing what happiness means to you. And you can download your photographs via my website, www.kathlloyd.co.uk, and go to the Stress Awareness Day page. There's another link there for you, and there will be a prize for the best photograph, which is a £240 worth photo shoot through Venture Photographic. And so it'd be fantastic to raise as much money as we can to help Young Minds, because like most charities, they're struggling for money. So what I'd love you to do is, if you've got any questions, well, first of all, I'm going to stop the recording. And if you've got any questions, then you can either type them in the box or just raise your hand, and then I'll unmute you and you can speak to either Lucy or myself. So I'm going to stop the recording now. But thank you, Lucy, for everything that you have talked about tonight.
It's a pleasure.